I'm Rachel Pollack, and I'm the co-designer of these cards called the Burning Serpent Oracle, for which I've written a full-length book about it. And both cards and deck are now being launched, so we're very excited about this. And I wanted to do a video reading because this is something that's been going on a lot, particularly with this tradition that these cards are coming from, where people do readings on video as a way to help others learn. And it's just a fun thing to do. My own background is in tarot primarily. So the actual tradition of Lenormand, which is what this is based on, is actually fairly new to me. And Robert Place did these pictures, and I've kind of jumped in head first and really enjoying it very much. But I've written a lot of books on tarot, and that's what I'm known for around the world. And behind me is a tarot deck that I actually drew called the Shining Tribe. So I've taken my knowledge of images and divination into working with this, and how images can come alive when we put them in front of us and we talk about them. And the great thing about divination is you have a question or an issue. And so these cards that could mean a bunch of different things, suddenly they just really come to life addressing the issue. There's this wonderful four-way kind of thing: the reader, the client, the cards, and the question. And those four things come together in a very organic kind of way. So the Burning Serpent Oracle is based upon a French deck. Well, actually not French, it's European, called Lenormand. The name is French, but it was more popular always in Germany and Belgium and Russia and Brazil, actually, which is interesting. The name Lenormand was the name of a famous French fortune teller around the time of Napoleon. And she was very famous because she supposedly read cards to the Empress Josephine and predicted the emperor's downfall. But the deck was named, the deck came out after she died, was named for her because she was famous. And there are 36 cards. We actually have added 2 extra cards, which are variations on to the existing cards, for our purposes of just having an alternative way to look at things. And what's interesting about this tradition is that compared to the tarot, which is very intellectual and spiritual, the Lenormand tradition is very basic. So there are cards like a house, there are clouds, there's stars, there's things like a fish. There's very basic kinds of things. And they mean things that are very concrete. And what we've done is we've stayed fairly close to that tradition. We had originally planned to do something a bit different, and some of the cards are a little bit further astray, but most of the cards are quite close. So for instance, a card called the Garden, this one, 20. And usually in the older decks, in the Lenormand decks, which are 19th century, it would show this wealthy, elegant garden, obviously in some sort of country mansion or something. And so we just did this kind of 19th century picket fence kind of garden. And then there's a beautiful red bird flying across the sky. And then there's an apple tree and a pear tree, and the apple tree is shorter. Very subtle kinds of symbolic things that you can use or not use. And often what I tend to do with these cards is I tend to first go to the level of the Lenormand tradition of very basic. So the garden means social. It's a social setting, a place where people go to congregate. It doesn't have to be a garden, it can be a football stadium. Because traditionally, the garden was a place where people met. An elegant, beautiful garden. Sometimes it meant an invitation to join a kind of exalted company. The older Lenormand decks had a certain kind of class level, or what I call haute bourgeoisie. So our house, the house on the hill, is this mysterious-looking, beautiful fairy tale house. And actually, we wanted to have a house. We talked about this card a lot, Robert and I. And we wanted to have a house that was a nice house, but also evoked a kind of fairy tale image. And Robert uses models a lot. So he looked around in Google Images for things that were not, copyrighted, that he could base stuff on. And he came across this house, And he did this, I think, beautiful picture. He added a few details to it. And then he came across an article about it, and it was designed to be a fairy tale house. So he completely nailed it, sort of exactly what it was. But in the older days, this house would be a kind of country mansion. Those kind of squared off, low peaked roofs, very elegant. There might be sort of a carriage in front of it. So we've made it kind of more homey at the same time, adding a kind of more slightly mysterious level. But the house just means your life. It's a positive card. It's a card of things being good. But then it's what's surrounded. So it's like next to the garden, we'd say like a house of social settings. This card, the bouquet, means invitations. So that might mean an invitation to some sort of social gathering, social gathering in some house that has a very nice feeling to it, Then if you have the clouds next to it, the clouds means confusion, things being obscured. So there'd be something going on in that house that you wouldn't understand. If the stars came next to it, it would be all cleared up. If the clouds came after the stars, it would say the clouds cover the stars. So it depends what the order is too. It's very interesting, yeah. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to have you ask a question and then mix the cards, and we'll try reading.
Okay.
So what question do you have?
My question is always this relationship question. I've been involved with somebody off and on for 7 years, and I always wonder, do we have a future? Do we not have a future? What do I do?
Okay. So mix the cards and we'll see what we get.
question.
Yeah.
So shuffle them or just kind of...
Shuffle them any way at all. It doesn't matter. However it works for you. Obviously, you want to give a chance for the cards to interact with each other and, get out of where they were and then put into a new configuration. This, I should say, is a prototype. The published version will be out in May. And we've been running an Indiegogo campaign, which is very exciting to raise money for it. It's doing really well. So cut the deck once. Okay, and this is a method I just developed spontaneously when I first started doing readings with this deck. You have the first card be the bottom of the top pile, and then the rest of the cards come off the second pile.
Okay.
So the stork is the first one. Well, so
That's
what's
not
your,
what I was expecting.
okay, you're thinking like a child.
Yeah,
Okay. Usually not. Usually the stork usually is a card of, it's something returning from a long distance. Travel can be involved. For me, the stork has become a kind of protective card. There's a snake in the picture, and storks are famous for protecting people from frogs and snakes. In the Netherlands, we had a great time doing research on these pictures, And this is, so now I'm going a bit beyond the traditional kind of meaning of things. But the Netherlands, in the country, in the city of The Hague, their emblem is a stork with a snake. And this is because there's a famous legend that when they drained the water to make land, when they did the dikes, to build the city, the land was infested with frogs and snakes. And then the storks, all the way down in Egypt, smelled this great feast and flew en masse and got rid of the frogs so they could build The Hague. So there's a quality slightly of protection about it,
From a distance.
Or coming to you.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see what else comes out. The hound increases that because the hound is a faithful friend. The rusty cross, which is burdens of some kind. Osiris is one of the variation cards. Would be the man at his best level. So that would be something positive about this person. The gold ring, which is a card of commitment. So that's like a strong indication of the relationship going somewhere. Especially because Osiris is looking at the gold ring. Looking away from the rusted cross towards the gold ring. So in a sense, away from whatever burdens there have been in the relationship, whatever was problem, and looking towards maybe going to another level of commitment. And the heart, so that's a very strong indication. A heart commitment. And then the last one in the line is Hermes the messenger, messages, something coming to you. So the stork and the messenger are opposite ends of the line, so there's something that's coming. Some kind of information, some kind of, there's an actual real possibility here of a proposal. However strange that would be to you.
That seems highly unlikely.
Well, Hermes the messenger brings something, and then there's this gold ring in there. But when you have, it's such an interesting, when you have the gold ring next to the heart, then the commitment is an emotional one. It doesn't have to be wedding. It doesn't, you know. The picture of this gold ring is actually, it's very beautiful. The traditional ring card, it's called a ring, usually shows an engagement ring. This version that Robert chose to do is this beautiful 19th century German wedding ring. I just think some people actually know what that is. I've been fascinated.
Yeah, it's such a
Several
large
people
ring.
looked at that picture and said, oh, that's a German wedding ring, isn't it? I thought, wow, you know. Anyway, but, and I started thinking about that because one of the things I did in my book was to think about the images and what they mean and why they mean what they mean. You know, which is, to me, since I love images are my life, it's just fascinating. For some people, they don't really care. We're constant what the logic is, you know, they just want to know what it means.
Right.
And for me, I love working things out. So, okay, so engagement ring versus wedding ring. The commitment, to some extent, for a lot of people, the romantic commitment is the engagement ring. That's why lots of rom-com movies end with, you know, the guy saying, will you marry me, and holding out the ring. They don't end with the wedding.
Right.
But the wedding, of course, is the real commitment.
Right.
It's when you cement the commitment.
It's the hard stuff.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that there's a quality here in which I feel like this person has had difficulties. He's had some burdens to deal with, some issues. But this reading to me kind of says that possibly your faithfulness to the situation has helped him get past that. And now he's looking to go to a next step kind of in some way.
So that makes me the hound?
Yeah, that's my feeling is, yeah. The rusted cross is a card of burdens, and that's kind of fascinating too. This tradition called Lenormand, the cards actually existed before Mademoiselle Lenormand's death. But they were not fortune-telling cards, they were a game called the Game of Hope. Das Spiel der Hoffnung. Osiris, and there were 36 cards in the gold ring, and then above the gold ring is Isis. And it was a great idea because, you know, so instead of having, you know, very powerful statement about, instead of carrying around this big folding board for your game, I keep dropping this damn thing, sorry about that. You just had a little set of playing cards, and then you laid them out in 4 rows of 9 each, and there was your game, right?
Yeah.
And the Game of Hope, one of the clever things about it is what's called a race game. You're trying to get to the end before the other guy. But the card that wins for you is the next to last card called the anchor. The anchor is a very ancient Christian symbol of hope. You're anchored in Christ's salvation.
Right.
And the last card, the rusted cross, or usually called the cross, the last card is like, oops, you went too far, and now you're stuck with burdens.
Right.
You know, so even though the cross, of course, we think of as the basic Christian sign of hope, it actually here is the sign of burdens. So in my book, I comment that it's like it's the crucifixion rather than the resurrection.
Right. Yeah.
So that's like there've been burdens. There have been difficulties.
Right.
You know, but the stork and the hound together like have this quality of like, you know, faithfulness, sticking to it, dealing with it. You know, and then that somehow turns him away from what had been a burden. And Osiris's, the basic cards of people are the man and the woman. A reading for a woman, the man card refers to the person, the man in her life, you know, especially when it's in the center.
Right.
Sometimes for you, the woman card, or Isis would be the center, but here it's him. So he's the focus in way more than you are.
Right.
You know? And so Osiris, as the variation, is like kind of the man at this best level. I one time was doing 2-card readings as a demonstration at a conference that I was at. And this woman said, sort of you, what will happen with my relationship?
Right.
In her case, she got Isis and the gold ring. So I said, if you act in your best way, rise to your highest level and, you know, avoid kind of pettiness or anger and stuff like that, your relationship will go to a new level of commitment. And here it's like he's doing that. And he's looking right at the gold ring and the heart's on the other side of it. So it's a pretty strong indication that, you know, he's feeling he's got beyond some burdens with your support maybe. And he wants to take it to another level. And Hermes, the messenger, say he'll do that fairly swiftly. You know, because the original card, this is card number 1, the original card is called the rider or the cavalier. It's a man on a horse. Very simple image. And here, Robert and I both feel very attached to Hermes in different ways. You know, I did a poem once about Hermes being my brother. And, Robert's website is Hermes as its emblem and stuff like this. We have a plan to go to New York City with the cards and do readings under the statue of Hermes at Rockefeller Center. Either out of the Grand Central one, but Rockefeller Center is better.
Where is Hermes at Rockefeller Center?
It's at the skating rink, behind the skating rink.
Oh, okay.
That big statue, that's Hermes, or Mercury. Mercury's his Roman name, yeah.
Yeah.
And at Grand Central is above the main entrance. And one time I did divinatory stuff at outside of Grand Central underneath the statue of Hermes. Anyway, the idea is to video it, So I'm going to do this thing. This is a pretty straightforward kind of thing. It's like a pretty strong statement and very clear. But there's a tradition that I've been learning that I like a lot called houses, in which you see the context of these cards. So we'll see what we get from that. So for this first one, I look at the card right under it. So the context of the stork, the house of the stork, is the sun. And the sun is a very happy card. It's joyous, it's simple, the sun is shining. So that faithful, that stork returning or coming to you from a distance in some way, or you doing that and being a protector, power, a very positive force, it's very simple. It's like in a place of simplicity and happiness, which is kind of nice. The hound is in the house of the anchor, steadfastness, being in there, commitment. That's the card I said, that's the winning card in the deck, the next to last card, the anchor. And it also means not going anywhere, because when the ship puts anchor down, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
And sometimes that, if it's a situation that needs to change, that can be a negative thing, but here it's a positive one. So the faithfulness is anchored, which is great. So the rusted cross is in the house of the jumping fish. His primary meaning is money. So there might have been some financial problems. The burdens might have had to do with financial issues in some way. And that's perhaps what's been resolved. The jumping fish is the card just before the anchor. So having faithfulness through that period of questionable finance issues seems to be very positive. Osiris is in the house of the girl and boy. Traditionally, that would be a child. So as a child, it can literally mean a child, and we did have a stork. So it's a kind of remote possibility, I would guess. Basically, the child means something new, something small, something positive, in the way we view children.
Right.
It's a happy card. The girl and boy, it's like in the image, they're kind of mostly naked, and they've turned their backs to us, so it's all about new things. So it's like his higher self, Osiris, is in the house of new things. Really like sort of going to a new level, The gold ring is in the house of Isis, so it's you matching him. Your higher self matching his higher self. Very, very positive configuration, Yeah. These cards, it's really quite remarkable, actually, to have the way those work out, And even though they're in a different line, they're looking towards each other, which is good. There's this wonderful whole thing in this tradition where, like, if the man and woman are there, but are they looking at each other, looking away from each other? Are there things between them?
Right.
I suggested one time, this is not the case here, that if you had the man and woman are looking away from each other, and there's some distance from each other, but between them is the child card, it means they stayed together for the sake of the children. That their lives are not in common. But here, like, that's not the case, and they're looking towards each other, which is very positive. Now, the heart's in the context of the dead tree, and that's stuff that's old, that's ended. So the heart, this is a revival of the heart, in other words. This whole thing of going to a new level is to kind of like give a new charge, like a heart transplant. We're like, clear and jolt the heart back.
I have to worry about heart transplants in my deck because we do have heart transplants
Okay.
in my family.
I was speaking metaphorically, believe
All
me.
right.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the
This is
actual
much more
tangible
emotional
thing.
than anything else he's reading,
When my brother had his transplant, he felt that his new heart was more emotional.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's just say, it's just saying that because we had those burdens and the rusted cross, it's like the heart is resurging in a sense from things that seem to be finished.
Yeah.
There's a coming back to life of, the relationship. And then Hermes the messenger is in the mice, which is a card to worry about a bit. It's things that know away. So I think that, to my mind, what's happening is Hermes is going to have to bring a message and go to another step, that will get past any kinds of little problems that keep, holding things
Mm.
back, you know. So these last two cards were on the more negative level, the dead tree and the mice. And so to have these positive cards in those houses means it's like overcoming things. Because the heart overcomes whatever had seemed dead in the relationship. And Hermes the messenger overcomes or frees you from problems that were gnawing away at things and to leave them in the past, kind of. There's also, what's interesting to have that dead tree in the heart configuration is that the main story of Isis and Osiris is about Isis bringing Osiris back to life after he was killed by his brother.
Oh.
So there's a whole idea of kind of resurrection here,
Resurrection.
of bringing something back to life. And with the girl and boy, the new thing, the new relationship. So there's definitely, just like, and the jumping fish, is another Christ image, and it's leaping out of the cross. So there's a very strong undercurrent here of resurrection.
Right.
The hound is another card because one of its references is Anubis, the Egyptian god who led the dead to Osiris and Isis to be resurrected. So there's a whole undercurrent of this relationship coming back to life, being freed of burdens in some way. So what I've just been doing all the talking, which is, in a certain way, it's a kind of fun thing as a fortune teller to have a system where you do all the talking.
Right.
But what questions or comments do you want? What would you like to say
Well,
about
the
this?
one thing something that you said about the stork
Okay.
coming back from far away
Yeah.
to solve all your problems does make me think of my high school boyfriend who's from Texas, the son.
Oh, great.
And he's coming into
That's so
town
cool.
on Friday. It
Uh-huh.
does make me think he's just going to show up here on Friday and solve all my problems.
Who knows? Yeah.
Well-
and Hermes the messenger. I mean, like someone rides into your life. So who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah.
Yeah, it could very well be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He and his daughter solved one little problem because I needed some money and she bought my car.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So it's like a little bit of money
Uh-huh.
coming in my life. Although it's not enough money to solve all of my problems. But you never know. Maybe you just.
Well, what's interesting
a
is like,
little
the
bit.
jumping fish is a leap in your fortunes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the rest of the cross would be your burdens, and then it's in the context of a leap in your fortunes to help, I mean, because the readings seem to focus more on him than in you in the basic
Yeah,
line,
yeah.
I was thinking of his issues.
Right.
This man that you've been with, his burdens that
Oh,
are
yeah, he
difficult
has
for him.
burdens, he has
And then those burdens getting lifted somehow,
That would be nice.
you know? Yeah.
That would be really nice.
And him moving towards this very positive direction.
Yeah, that would be really nice.
Yeah. So even though I would say these last two cards, the heart and the Hermes, are in the house that's more negative,
Yeah.
the basic line is more important, But definitely, like I say, the heart in the house of the dead tree to me can only mean, especially with Isis next to it, can only mean the heart coming back to life,
Good.
a restoration. And Hermes the messenger in the house of the mice is just like, so the mice can be sort of small little thefts, things you can't, because they're like mice,
Right, right,
You wake up in the morning and the mice have eaten your food. You didn't see them do it.
right.
Robert did this interesting thing because he has lots of mice. He lives in a real country house, And so he had the mice on his desk. There's a piece of cheese, but there's also like top of the books with a pencil. One of the mice seems to be reading a book,
Right.
teaching itself to read.
Right.
So he was thinking this is like an intellectual property theft. And I realized, of course, it's in our modern context, it's like intellectual property theft is so easy. All you need is a computer, some basic sense of web hacking, and a mouse.
Right, a mouse.
The thing that you use to do it is a mouse, which
Yeah.
is so,
Oh,
it's kind of interesting thing to think about.
it's funny. I have a hard time associating mice with negativity. I don't know why.
Well, a lot of people do because they're
Yeah.
cute,
They're sort of cute.
When I was writing about it, I started thinking about, our view of mice is cute, and,
Yeah.
and we're on their side by gum,
Yeah.
And I realized that comes from a single source.
Tom and Jerry.
Nope, Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse. Oh,
Yeah, 1927, I think it was. It was
Yeah.
Steamboat Willie,
Yeah.
and he changed his name to
And
Mickey.
all of a sudden,
Yeah.
we don't see mice.
Well, suddenly the
as
mouse was the
much.
hero,
Yeah.
Because if you look at earlier cartoons, early silent cartoons of mice, they're the villains. These farmer alfalfa cartoons, in which they're always the same plot. The farmer and the cat are trying to get rid of the mice, and eventually they just have to run away from the farm, being chased away by the mice. And certainly in the 19th century, people didn't think of mice in any positive way.
Guess not. But
I
my
just
house,
read, by
they're
the way,
fine.
that bubonic plague was apparently not spread by rats and mice as people have thought for 500 years.
How was it spread?
Airborne.
Really?
There's no way that the flea bites that were supposedly spreading it could have done that so quickly.
Oh. So
You know.
there had to be an airborne aspect.
Yeah, it had to be an airborne aspect of it. Yeah, interesting. That's what makes it so terrifying.
It is terrifying.
Yeah.
It's truly terrifying.
But now I'm going to think about this mice as about referencing computers. So yeah, Hermes the messenger could be the message coming via a mouse. Computers, interesting.
Yeah.
Something I like about the modern Lenormand is this creativity that people have. So the garden, I said, means social stuff. The stars, because it's stars, it can mean electricity, you know. So you have the stars can be the internet. The garden is social, so it becomes Facebook and social media, you know, those two together.
Huh.
And then there's a card called the birds, which means light chatter. So of course that's Twitter, if you put it with the stars. I mean, it's just, I love that kind of stuff. It's fascinating, you know. It's, the Lenormand tradition is so wonderful because it's so alive, it's so creative. I just so, you know, I'm a beginner in that tradition. I know this deck because we designed it. I work with images, you know, so I feel comfortable, but I'm a beginner in Lenormand stuff. And some of the people who've been doing this, you know, all their lives, it's just amazing the combinations they come up with, the way they just can pinpoint things, you know? It's really great.